Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bailey Sugar, and welcome to my photo analysis presentation. In my presentation, I cover primarily a race issue, but also a little bit of the class issues regarding the poverty. I chose the Latin community to primarily talk about, kind of where they are with poverty levels and, of course, crime. So, my first photo here you can see is a picture of the Merriam-Webster's Intermediate Dictionary. The reason I chose the picture of the dictionary is because I was going through and I realized there was no like Spanish translations or anything of sorts. And in my description here, um, I talk about how the Latin community and those who speak Spanish are highly misunderstood, and the language barriers create so many issues for them because, I mean, they're just misunderstood. Um, and the Latin community and makes up like a good amount of our population now. Um, the statistics that I'm going to read you in this slide says that most US Hispanics are US born. Of the 63 million people in 2022 who are self-identified as Hispanic or Latino, 68% were native born and 32% were immigrants. So as you can see, the numbers are pretty high. There's a good amount of them over here. Um, and I talk about how one of the biggest struggles that they face is not being accepted into society as much as their white peers, whether they were born here or immigrated here from their home country. And I really think that the language barrier is one of the biggest issues. Working, especially even at Starbucks, I interact with a lot of Mexican families or Latin families, those who do not speak fluent English all the time. And it makes you feel really bad for them when they're doing their best to communicate with you. And I know I do my best to communicate back with them. You know, I'll Google Translate if I need to, but not everybody does that for them. And I wanted to point out that in this dictionary specifically, maybe others there are, but in this one specifically, there was no Spanish translations. Um, and there is a lack of effort on so many people's ends to understand them, and it's really sad. Um, my next slide, as you can see, is a picture of just some trees. You can see a little basketball goal over there. Um, and in this slide, I I talk about how so many Mexicans or Latin folk immigrate to our country here in the US or even other countries, excuse me, to try to give themselves a better life, their families a better life, or even come over here to start a family and overall have more opportunities and be free. I chose this picture as an example. Like to me, freedom is just being able to go outside and just enjoy being, enjoy the trees, enjoy just living. And unfortunately, that is not something that everybody gets to enjoy. And they want to, you know, they yearn for the feeling of being free. Um, but as I talk about in my slide here, in many cases they experience scrutiny, judgment, lack of care, and so many of them at the end of the day do end up living in poverty. Um, the statistic I brought into this slide, it says among the four largest ethnic and racial groups in the United States, Hispanics has the highest rate of child poverty at 19.5% in 2022, as measured by the supplemental poverty measure. That's for children, that's a very high poverty rate. And a lot of it is due to the lack of opportunities the lack of care as I talk about. And it's kind of crazy how that's just how it is for them. Whereas, for example, myself, I have not had any pushback trying to live my life or do things I want to. And for that, I'm very lucky. Um, and like I said, this picture to me, I mean, going outside is freedom to me. Enjoying nature as it is being free. And I wish that these people, the Mexicans and others, could be able to enjoy life as we do. Photo 3 here is a picture of actually my car. And it probably seems like, well, why do you have a picture of your car here? Well, I chose a picture of my car um, because in our societies, sorry, I was trying to think about how I wanted to word this. In our societies, so many people are judged, as I just talked about, judged for the way they look, what they drive, how they are, even when there's no real basis on that judgment. And in my slide here, I talk about how the example I chose to say was if I was driving down the road next to a Mexican man driving a car that's a little beat down, not newer or anything like that, both of us following the rules of the road, he would be more likely to be stopped by law enforcement just because he is thought to be suspicious or shady. And I think that is, I mean, that's just how it is. As awful as that sounds, and not to sound like a broken record, but that is what happens and how things go for so many people who are different than white, especially the Latin community. 56% of Latinos have had contact with the criminal justice system firsthand or have had close family members who has. That's a large percent that has come in contact with law enforcement or people that know people who have been stopped by law enforcement. Um, this is the outcome of so many cases where you could have somebody of a different ethnicity, in this case, the Mexicans or Latinx community, compared to whites, where the the different racial groups will just be targeted. And we all know, we've been learning about this. We all know that this is what happens and how things go. And it is completely unjustified and does not serve any real justice. Even if these people are being arrested, half the time it's because they are who they are. I mean, and this also kind of goes hand in hand with like sentencing disparities, where you have blacks, Mexicans, Asians. I mean, I'll mention them all that will be treated and forced to serve sentences that are harsher than their white counterpart. Um, and obviously, this is a big issue, and systemic racism is there, and it is evident, and it may not be written out like that, but that's just how things go. Um, my next slide is a picture of a gun. I chose this picture of a gun because Hispanic and Latino populations are disproportionately at risk for gun violence victimization. Um, we know that gun violence has increased and there is issues with gun violence everywhere. But there are specific groups of people that are targeted, and the Hispanic and Latino populations are some of those communities. Um, I chose this picture just to represent some people use guns as tools. They hunt and, they use them to, hunt and get food or you know, protect themselves, but it is a weapon that is used against specific communities to harm them, to hurt them, and to kill them in some cases, unfortunately. But I felt like this should be mentioned because I didn't know that they were such a target for gun violence specifically. Um, and I mean, it's really sad. And I wanted to share with you guys just this little fact. So, photo 5 here. So, this is actually a more personal picture here. This is actually my papa, my grandfather. I have family that is Mexican. I am a little further down the line, so I don't have, the genes. I don't really speak Spanish. I have taken the time to learn some Spanish to try to connect with the family I don't know very well, just because it made me feel more connected to them. But my papa is Mexican. He has dark hair, the darker skin, the features of Latin Mexican people. And he himself has been a victim of being bullied and being beaten and treated differently just because he looked different. He had darker skin. Um, Latinos are more likely to become victims of crimes. As we just talked about, gun violence is at the top of the list. They experience racism, have contact with the police. And I wanted to mention this personal element just because I felt like it went along with my theme here. And I also learned this interesting thing that it's a form of racism, but it's called colorism, and it's a branch of racism, but it's not the same thing. Colorism is essentially where people like you could there's different skin tones and different things like that. And I did not know that colorism was a thing until reading and learning about this during this project. And colorism is essentially when people are discriminated against for different shades of their skin and not necessarily their ethnicity or race. And I mean, I thought that was just racism. I didn't realize there was a whole term for it. And so I felt like that really went with this specific slides theme, because Papa was bullied and got into many fights when he was younger just because he was darker. Papa wasn't ever completely fluent in Spanish. He was separated from his family at the age of 19. So he didn't always speak Spanish or anything like that like them. He was just looked different. And I thought this was an interesting thing. So I hope you guys find it interesting too. Okay, what is my next slide? Oh, okay. So photo 6, as you can see, I have a picture. This is actually one of my cats. And you're probably wondering why I chose a picture of my cat. And I'm going to tell you why. So we all know that many people suffer from discrimination, racism, and all that. And their poverty levels are high. These minority groups deal with so many different elements, negative elements that they have to try to fight through and get through. And I think that in so many cases, so many of these people are treated like animals. And so many people treat animals better than people. I'm an animal lover and I also love people. I love my animals and I love my people. I will never be hateful or anything like that, and nor do I want to be. I try to help others understand different cultures and different things like that because I think it helps us as people be more understanding and accepting when we take the time to understand others. And in this slide, I talk about how a large portion of the Latin population is in prison. Hispanics are the fastest growing group being in prison, increasing from 10.9% of all state and federal inmates in 1985 to 15.6 in 2001. So this is from a little bit ago. It just makes you wonder what the numbers are now, considering the Latin population has grown since. And those who are imprisoned are treated like they are less than people and are forced to do nothing but accept what they cannot do anything about. Because that's the way the system is. That is how it goes. It's a trend. You know, you can talk to different people from different minority groups, and it's about all the same for them. Latin or Mexicans who are imprisoned are less likely to be released on bail, are forced to do extra work in prison, fearing a harsher punishment. And I chose this picture of my cat because most people do treat their pets or animals in general better than people. And the inmates are treated like animals. They're treated like they are not important when they are, and it is very uncalled for. Um, Sorry, I'm kind of getting confused on the things I want to say. I hope you guys understand what I mean. But yeah, I felt like you could look at this picture of my cat and see how healthy she is, you know. Look at those little eyes, and you were to look at a picture of an inmate who maybe is malnourished or has some injuries, you know, because I mean, there's prison violence and all these different things. And maybe it's not a good comparison, but in my mind, it made sense. And I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say as well. What is my next slide? Oh, photo 7. Okay, so for picture 7, I decided to use a picture of a globe. Um, in this slide, I talk about how the world is full of so many people. That is my first line here. My second line is it is filled with a variety of cultures, languages, ideas, beliefs, and so many other things. And to me, the globe represents togetherness or unity, as I say. And it is so important. Unity is so important for everyone, not just not just white people, not just Latin people, not just Black people, Asian, wherever you're from. It is important for everyone because we will never be able to work together, meet goals without supporting each other. And to me, that's what the globe means. And I really wish that more people felt this way and thought about the world differently than they do, if that makes sense. Um, these people, Latin people, migrate or immigrate from their country to ours in hopes of something better for themselves, like I said before. But in a lot of times are met with hatred, and there's no real reason for it other than the systematic racial tendencies that I point out here that are integrated in the systems that are supposed to help, not hurt. The system hurts so many people more than help. And sometimes the system works. A lot of times it doesn't. And that is something I feel like we all need to work on, especially for the minority communities. And I think about my own personal life and how I have family members who have dealt with these kinds of issues of being discriminated against or whatever, and how I am lucky enough that I haven't experienced that. But it makes me sad that they have. And I wish, as I've said a million times through this video already, I wish things were different. You know, I've been able to thrive and do my best and do things that I can for myself, my friends, my family. And it wasn't as easy for them. And I don't understand that at all when we're not that different. We're not that different at all. Um, People are closer and more similar than what we realize. And I think that is something that we need to acknowledge more often, is that we are so much more alike than we are different. And that is something I will always stand by. Photo 8. We know that the world is full of racism, hatred, and there is a lack of acceptance for other people. You've heard me say this also a million times through this video, but that these are my big points. And I'm sure we can all agree on these things. So I know you guys will understand. Um, I have a picture here of, this is actually a picture of my curtain. I call it my starry night because it's filled with holes for my cat's claws. But when I looked at it after reading about doing this assignment, I looked at it and it registered, I don't know, the pattern registered differently in my mind. To me, it made me think about little glimpses of hope. And people here, we're talking about the Latin communities, struggle and struggle and struggle and we are put into prison, put into jail, deal with poverty, are treated awful, and there is only little glimpses of hope at the end of their tunnel. And that is exactly what this picture means to me. You know, it's mainly black, but you do have these little glimpses of hope that you see here. And I felt like it was a good symbolic picture. And I think that it makes sense. And I think that we need to make the light at the end of all these people's tunnel bigger and brighter and not give them a dark hole to live in and then throw them aside. You know, that's just not how it should be. Um, and that is it. This is just my references. Thank you guys for listening. Sorry I was all over the place. I'm gonna level with everybody here. I get a little nervous when I'm talking, get a little caught up on my words, but I really feel like you guys will understand where I'm coming from with all of these pictures and slides, and some of them get a little wordy, but it's because it's important to me, and especially talking about Hispanic people, because I have family that is Hispanic, and I really feel like it's just, you mainly hear about, white and blacks or whatever, and I don't see too much or too many people talk about what Hispanic people go through when they get here and the trials and tribulations that they are forced to go through. And especially my first slide here, going back to it, the fact that there was no Spanish translations when the Hispanic is one of like the second largest population in the US, like we still do not have ways to try to better understand each other outside of technology. Um, Kind of crazy. But thank you all so much. And I hope you guys understand and learn something new from this little slideshow. Overall, I enjoyed sharing with you guys, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.